A lot of rain ambience here. I've never noticed like that big of a silence in between songs, but I think usually I'm reading by the time that is a thing. But welcome in. Hello, Mantis, Tibiano, and Patrick. Hello, hello. I'm gonna... Oh, I forgot to... Oh. I forgot to open up your guys' little stuff. Give me a second. I'll also move the mic closer to my face. That would probably be helpful. But I hope everyone's ready to finish Frankenstein. It's been a long, however many months we've been doing this. Part 9. We finished under 10 parts, which I think is a testament to... I wouldn't say my reading speed. Because I know that there has been streams where we don't even reach an hour. I know there's been streams under an hour, so I won't say we pushed through it. I think we went at a moderately slow pace. And hello, Darkside as well. Welcome in. Oh, what's my analysis of The Good Doctor? The Good Doctor. I wouldn't call Frankenstein a good doctor. I wouldn't even call him a doctor. Did he graduate? I don't remember reading anywhere in this book that he's a graduate. I think that's the Universal Studios Frankenstein movie trying to trick you into thinking that he got his doctorate. Because I don't remember him graduating. Maybe he did before he built the whole monster, and I'm wrong. I could be. But I think he's a college dropout. No one's ever called him Dr. Frankenstein in this book. I've not seen a single instance of someone calling him Dr. Frankenstein. It's been Victor a lot of the time. Just no address at all. I make you sub me for the resub. Why does that say victory? Is that what happens when you sub? It might be. It might be. It just said victory really, really big on the screen. But yeah. We're gonna be reading the last chapter of Frankenstein. It's kind of a doozy, kind of a long one. We'll probably finish it, to be honest, in like 30 minutes or so, 30 to 40 minutes. And if that happens, what we're gonna do, if it's under the hour mark, then I've got a cozy game installed. Little Problems. It's like a little detective game where you solve everyday problems. That would be a nice pivot. I'll have to remake the YouTube lobby because I don't like doing 2 different games in one stream usually. So I'll probably just have to quickly make a thumbnail because I didn't plan this far ahead. I just remembered like right before stream I was like, oh, that game came out. So if we finish really quick, I will make a new thumbnail for YouTube, quickly make a new stream, and we'll pivot. Sound good? If so, I'm gonna take a drink. And we're just gonna get right into... I mean, do I pad it out a bit? Nah, if people wanted to be here, they'd be here. They can watch the VOD if they missed the first part of the... If they missed the first part of the final chapter of Frankenstein, which I don't think many people are lining up to do. Then I can watch the VOD. Okay. My present situation was... Wait. A recap. Naturally. So, we found out the guy who was killed in Scotland... I think it was Scotland, was Clerval. Oh no, our best friend Clerval. He's dead. The monster killed him. And famed Victor, which was a little bit funny. So Victor spent quite a while in jail, going absolutely cuckoo bananas. His dad got a message and came down to go grab him. Because, whoa, he passed the court trial, the second trial, by the way, of this book. So that happens, and then Victor's back home in Geneva. Him and his dad went all the way back there. Yippee! And he's like, you know what? I'm gonna get married. Even if that monster tries to kill me on my wedding day, I'm either gonna kill him or it'll be fine. But then he finds out after his wedding day that, oh no, when the monster said, "I'll see you on your wedding day," it wasn't to threaten his life. It was to make him miserable by killing his soon-to-be wife, Elizabeth. So as he's, like, pacing up and down in their little, like, honeymoon lodgings, he hears, like, a crash and a scream, and he catches Frankenstein running out the window after killing his wife, his newly wife. And he gets mad. He gets really mad. He goes a little bit cuckoo bananas again. But then he goes back to Geneva from his honeymoon. And he tells his dad. And his dad, he's lost a son. He's lost his son's best friend. His son is currently going cuckoo bananas. And now he's lost, like, the basically daughter he's raised. So he goes crazy and his heart gives out and he dies. And then once Victor gets, like, a little bit of his sanity restored, he goes to the courthouse, and he's like, "I need you guys to find this monster. I want to take him to court." And the courthouse manager's like, yeah, okay. I don't know how you expect us to, like, get him. But sure, that sounds terrible. I'll take it, you know, if you can get him here, you know, if he listens. I don't think the court guy really knows what he's supposed to do in this scenario. And he's like, all right, I'll do it. Yeah, his cousin wife. It's 1818 text, you know. It's the 1800s. People marry their cousins all the time. Is it a good thing? Not really, but, you know, I'm not here to judge on that. A VTuber knows how to read, I know. A dying breed. But we exist. Okay. A drink, and then we're starting the final chapter. My present situation was one in which all voluntary thought was swallowed up and lost. I was hurried away by fury. Revenge alone endowed me with strength and composure. It modeled my feelings and allowed me to be calculating and calm, in periods when otherwise delirium or death would have been on my portion. My first resolution was to quit Geneva forever, my country, which, when I was happy and beloved, was dear to me. Now, in my adversity, became hateful. I provided myself with a sum of money, together with a few jewels that had belonged to my mother, and departed. And now my wanderings began, which are to cease but with life. I have travelled a vast portion of the earth, and have been endured all hardships which travellers in deserts and barbarous countries are wont to meet. How I have lived, I hardly know. Many times I have stretched my failing limbs upon sandy plain and prayed for death. But revenge kept me alive. I dared not die and leave my adversary in being. When I quitted Geneva, my first labour was to gain some clue by which I might trace the steps of my fiendish enemy. But my plan was unsettled, and I wandered many hours around the confines of town, uncertain which path I should pursue. As night approached, I found myself at the entrance of the cemetery where William, Elizabeth, and my father reposed. I entered it, and approached the tomb which marked their graves. Everything was silent, except the leaves of the trees, which were gently agitated by the wind. The night was nearly dark, and the scene would have been solemn and affecting, even to an uninterested observer. The spirits of the departed seemed to flit around and to cast a shadow, which was felt but seen not, around the head of the mourner. The deep grief which this scene had first excited quickly gave way to rage and despair. They were dead, and I lived. Their murderer also lived, and to destroy him I must drag out my weary existence. I knelt on the grass and kissed the earth, and with quavering lips exclaimed, "By sacred earth on which I kneel, by the shades that wander near me, by the deep and eternal grief I feel, I swear, and by thee, O night,
and by the spirits that preside over thee, I swear to pursue the daemon who caused this misery until he or I shall perish in mortal conflict. For this purpose, I will preserve my life. To execute this dear revenge, will I again behold the sun and tread the green herbage of earth, which otherwise should vanish from my eyes forever. And I call on you, spirits of the dead, and on you, wandering ministers of vengeance, to aid and conduct me in agony. Let him feel the despair that now torments me.
I had begun my adjuration with solemnity, and with awe which almost assured me that the shades of my murdered friends heard and approved my devotion. But the furies possessed me as I concluded, and rage choked my utterance. I was answered through stillness of night by a loud and fiendish laugh. It rung on my ears long and heavily. The mountains re-echoed it, and I felt as if all hell surrounded me with mockery and laughter. Surely in that moment I should have been possessed by frenzy and have destroyed my miserable existence. But now that my vow was heard, and that I was reserved for vengeance, the laugh died away. And when a well-known and abhorred voice, apparently close to my ear, addressed me in an audible whisper. "I am satisfied, miserable wretch. You have determined to live, and I am satisfied." I darted towards the spot from which the sound proceeded, but the devil eluded my grasp. Suddenly, the broad disk of the moon arose and shone full upon his ghastly and distorted face as he fled with more than mortal speed. I pursued him, and for many months this had been my task. Guided by a slight clue, I followed the windings of the Rhone, but vainly. The blue Mediterranean appeared, and by a strange chance I saw the fiend enter by night and hide himself in a vessel bound for the Black Sea. I took my passage in the same ship, but he escaped. I know not how. Amidst the wilds of Tartary and Russia, although he still evaded me, I have ever followed in his track. Sometimes the peasants, scared by his horrid apparition, informed me of his path. Sometimes he himself, who feared that if I lost all trace I should despair and die, often left some mark to guide me. The snows descended on my head, and I saw the print of his huge step on the white plain. To you, first entering on life, to whom care is new, and agony unknown, how can you understand what I felt and still feel? Cold, want, and fatigue were the least pains which I was destined to endure. I was cursed by some devil and carried about with me in my internal hell. Yet still, a spirit of good fellowed and directed my steps, and when I most murmured, would suddenly extricate me from my seemingly unsurmountable difficulties. Sometimes, when nature, overcome by hunger, sunk under exhaustion, a repast was prepared for me in the desert that restored and inspirited me. The fare was indeed coarse, such as the peasants of the country ate, but I may not doubt that it was set there by the spirits that I had invoked to aid me. Often, when all was dry, the heavens cloudless, and I was parched to thirst, a slight cloud would bedeem the sky and shed few drops to revive me, and vanish. I followed, when I could, the courses of rivers, but the daemon generally avoided these, as it was here that the population of the country chiefly collected. In other places, human beings were seldom seen, and I generally subsisted on wild animals that crossed my path. I had money with me, and gained the friendship of villagers by disturbing it, or bringing with me some food that I had killed, which, after taking a small part, I always presented to those who had provided me with fire and utensils for cooking. My life, as it had passed thus, was indeed hateful to me, and it was during sleep alone that I could taste joy. Oh, blessed sleep! Often, when most miserable, I sank to repose, and my dreams lulled me even to rapture. The spirits that guarded me had provided these moments, or rather hours, of happiness, that I might retain strength to fulfill my pilgrimage. Derived of this respite, I should have sunk under my hardships.
During the day, I was sustained and inspirited by the hope of the night, for in sleep I saw my friends, my wife, and my beloved country again. I saw the benevolent countenance of my father, heard the silver tones of my Elizabeth's voice, and beheld Clerval, enjoying health and youth. Often, when wearied by toilsome march, I persuaded myself that I was dreaming until night should come, and that I should then enjoy the reality in the arms of my dearest friends. What agonizing fondness did I feel for them? How did I cling to their dear forms, and sometimes they haunted even my waking hours, and persuade me that they still lived. At such moments, vengeance, that burned within me, died in my heart, and I pursued my path towards the destruction of the daemon, more than the task enjoined by heaven, as the mechanical impulse of some power of which I was unconscious, than that as the ardent desire of my soul. What his feelings were whom I pursued, I cannot know. Sometimes, indeed, be left marks in writing on barks of trees, or cut in stone that guided me, and instigated my fury. "My reign is not over yet." These words were legible in one of the inscriptions. "You will live, and my power is complete. Follow me. I seek the everlasting ices of the north, where you will feel the misery and cold and frost, to which I am impassive. You will find near this place, if you follow not too tardily, a dead hare. Eat and be refreshed. Come on, my enemy. We have yet to wrestle for our lives, but many hard and miserable hours you must endure until that period shall arrive." Scoffing devil! Again I do vow vengeance. Again do I devote thee, miserable fiend, to torture and death. Never will I omit my search until he or I perish, and then with ecstasy shall I join my Elizabeth, and those who even now prepare for me the reward of my tedious toil and horrible pilgrimage. As I still pursued my journey to the northward, the snows thickened, and the cold increased in degree almost too severe to support. The peasants were shut up in their hovels, and only a few of the most hardy ventured forth to seize the animals from whom starvation had forced from their hiding places to seek for prey. The rivers were covered in ice, no fish could be procured, and thus I was cut off from the chief article of maintenance. The triumph of my enemy increased with difficulty of my labours. One inscription he left was in these words: "Prepare, your toils only begin. Wrap yourselves in fur, and provide food, for we shall soon enter upon a journey where your sufferings will satisfy my everlasting hatred." My courage and perseverance were invigorated by these scoffing words. I resolved not to fail in my purpose, and, calling on heaven to support me, I continued with unabated fervour to traverse immense deserts until the ocean appeared at a distance and formed the utmost boundary of the horizon. Oh, how unlike it was to the blue seas of the south! Covered with ice, it was only to be distinguished from land by its superior wildness and ruggedness. The Greeks wept for joy when they beheld the Mediterranean from the hills of Asia, and hailed with rapture the boundary of their toils. I did not weep, but I knelt down, and with a full heart thanked my guiding spirit for conducting me in safety to the place where I hoped, notwithstanding my adversary's gibe, to meet and grapple with him. Some weeks before this period, I procured a sledge and dogs, and thus traversed the snows with inconceivable speed. I do not know whether the fiend possessed the same advantages, but I found that, as before I had daily lost ground in the pursuit, I now gained on him, so much so that when I first saw the ocean, he was but 1 day's journey in advance, and I hoped to intercept him before he should reach the beach. With new courage, therefore, I pressed on, and in 2 days arrived at the wretched hamlet on the seashore. I inquired of the inhabitants concerning the fiend, and gained accurate information. The gigantic monster, they said, had arrived the night before, armed with a gun and many pistols, putting to flight the inhabitants of Solitary Cottage for fear of his terrific appearance. He had carried off their store of winter food, and placing it on a sledge, to draw which he had seized a numerous drove of trained dogs, he had harnessed them, and in the same night, the joy of the horror-struck villagers had pursued his journey across sea in a direction that led to no land, and they conjectured that he must speedily be destroyed by the breaking of the ice or the frozen of eternal frosts. Oh, hearing this information, I suffered temporary access of despair. He had escaped me, and I must commence a destructive and almost endless journey across the mountainous ices of the ocean, amidst cold that few of the inhabitants could long endure, and which I, the native of a genial and sunny climate, could not hope to survive. Yet, at the idea that the fiend should live and be triumphant, my rage and vengeance returned, and like a mighty tide, overwhelmed every other feeling. After a slight repose, during which the spirits of dead hovered round and instigated me to toil and revenge, I prepared for my journey. I exchanged my land sled for one fashioned for the inequalities of frozen ocean, and purchasing a plentiful stock of provisions, I departed from land. I cannot guess how many days have passed since then, but I have endured misery, which nothing but the eternal sentiment of a just retribution burning within my heart could have enabled me to support. Immense and rugged mountains of ice often barred up my passage, and I often heard the thunder of the ground sea, which threatened my destruction. But again the frost came, and made the path of the sea secure. For the quantity of the provision which I had consumed, I had guessed that about 3 weeks had passed into this journey, and the continual protraction of hope returning back upon the heart often wrung bitter drops of despondency and grief from my eyes. Despair had indeed almost secured her prey, and I should have soon sunk beneath this misery, when once, after poor animals that had carried me with incredible toil gained the summit of this loping ice mountain, and one sinking under his fatigue died. I viewed the expanse before me with anguish, when suddenly my eye caught a dark speck upon the dusky plain. I strained my sight to discover what it could be, and uttered a wild cry of ecstasy when I distinguished a sledge, and the distorted proportions of a well-known form within. Oh! With what a burning gush did hope revisit my heart! Warm tears filled my eyes, which I hastily wiped away, that they might not intercept the view I had of the daemon. But still, my sight was dimmed by burning drops, until, giving way to emotions that oppressed me, I wept aloud. Quick drink break. But this was not the time for delay. I disencumbered the dogs of their dead companion, gave them a plentiful provision of food, and after an hour's rest, which was absolutely necessary, and yet was bitterly irksome to me, I continued my route. The sledge was visible, nor did I again lose sight of it, except at the moments when, for a short time, some ice rock concealed it, with its intervening crags. I indeed perceptibly gained on it, and when nearly after 2 days' journey, I beheld my enemy at no more than a mile distant, my heart bounded within me. But now, I appeared mostly within the grasp of my enemy. My hopes were suddenly extinguished, and I lost all trace of him more utterly than I had ever done before. A ground sea was heard, the thunder of its progress, and the waters rolled and swelled beneath me, became every moment more ominous and terrific. I pressed on, but in vain. The wind arose, and the sea roared, and, as with the mighty shock of an earthquake, it split and cracked with tremendous and overwhelming sound. The work was soon finished. In a few minutes, a tumultuous sea rolled between me and my enemy, and I was left drifting on a scattered piece of ice that was continually lessening, and thus preparing me for a hideous death. In this manner, many appalling hours passed, several of my dogs died, and I myself was about to sink under the accumulation of distress, when I saw your vessel riding at anchor, and holding forth to me hopes of succour and life. I had no conception that vessels ever came so far north, and was astounded at the sight. I quickly destroyed part of my sled to construct oars, and by these means was enabled, with infinite fatigue, to move my ice raft in the direction of your ship. I determined, if you were going southward, still to trust myself to the mercy of the seas, rather than to abandon my purpose. I hoped to induce you to grant me a boat, with which I could still pursue my enemy. But your direction was northward. You took me on the boat when my vigor was exhausted, and I should have soon sunk under my multiplied hardships into a death which I still dread, for my task is unfulfilled. Oh, when will my guiding spirit in conducting me to the daemon allow me the rest of which I so much desire? Or must I die, and he yet live? If I do, swear to me, Walton, that he shall not escape, that you will seek him and satisfy my revenge in death. Yet, do I dare ask you to undertake my pilgrimage to endure the hardships that I have undergone? No, I am not so selfish. Yet, when I am dead, if he should appear, if the ministers of vengeance should conduct him to you, swear that he shall not live. Swear that he shall not triumph over my accumulated woes, and live to make another such a wretch as I am. He is eloquent and persuasive, and once his words had even power over my heart. But trust him not. His soul is as hellish as his form, full of treachery and a fiend-like malice. Hear him not. Call on the names of William, Justine, Clerval, Elizabeth, my father, and the wretched Victor, and thrust your sword into his heart. I will have it near and direct the steel aright. It's like a mid-chapter break. Ooh, it's getting spicy though. Thank you for the follow as well. So now we're back up to the present. And we're going back to... So all of that was Victor Frankenstein telling his tale. So now we're back in the perspective of Robert Walton. Really hope I got his first name right. It has been a hot minute. August 26, 17. You have read this strange and terrific story, Margaret, and do you not feel your blood congealed with horror, like that which now curdles mine? Sometimes, seized with sudden agony, he could not continue his tale. At others, his voice broken, yet piercing. Uttered with difficulty the words so replete with agony. His fine and lovely eyes were now lighted up with indignation, now subdued, so downcast sorrow, and quenched in infinite wretchedness. Sometimes he commended his countenance and tones, and related the most horrible incidents with tranquil voice, suppressing every mark of agitation. Then, like a volcano bursting forth, his face would suddenly change to an expression of the wildest rage as he shrieked out the imprecations of his persecutor. His tale is connected and told with an appearance of the simplest truth, yet I own to you that the letters of Felix and Sapphi, which he showed me, and the apparition of this monster seen from our ship, brought me to the greater conviction of the truth of his narrative than his assertions. However earnest and connected, such a monster has then really existence. I cannot doubt it, yet I am so lost in surprise and admiration. Sometimes I endeavor to gain from Frankenstein the particulars of his creature's formation, but on this point he was impenetrable.
"Are you mad, my friend?" said he, "or whither does your senseless curiosity lead you? Would you also create for yourself and the world a demoniacal enemy? Or to what do your questions tend? Peace, peace! Learn on my miseries. Do not seek to increase your own." Frankenstein discovered that I made notes concerning his history. He asked to see them, and then himself corrected and augmented them in many places, but principally in giving the life and spirit to the conversations he held with his enemy.
Since you have preserved my narration,
Said he,
I would not that mutilated one should go down to posterity.
Thus has a week passed away, while I have listened to the strangest tale that ever imagination formed. My thoughts and every feeling of my soul have been drunk up by the interest for my guest, which this tale, and his own elevated and gentle manners, have created. I wish to soothe him, yet can I counsel one so infinitely miserable, so destitute of every hope and consolation to live? Oh no! The only joy that he can now know will be when he composes his shattered feelings to peace and death. Yet, he enjoys one comfort, the offspring of solitude and delirium. He believes that, when in dreams he holds converse with his friends, and derives from that communication consolation for his miseries, or excitements to his vengeance, that they are not the creations of his fancy, but the real beings who visit him from the regions of remote world. This faith gives a solemnity to his reveries that render them, to me, almost as imposing and interesting to truth. Our conversations are not always confined to his history of misfortunes. On every point of general literature he displays unbound knowledge and a quick and piercing apprehension. His eloquence is forcible and touching, nor can I hear him when he relates a pathetic incident, or endeavours to move the passions of pity or love without tears. What a glorious creature he must have been in the days of his prosperity, when he is thus noble and godlike in ruin. He seems to feel his own worth, and the greatness of his fall.
When younger,
Said he,
I felt as if I was destined for some great enterprise. My feelings are profound, but I possessed a coolness of judgment that fitted me for the illustrious achievements. The sentiment of worth of my nature supported me, when others would have been oppressed. For I deemed it criminal to throw away in useless grief those talents that might be useful to my fellow creatures. When I reflected on the work I completed, no less a one than my creation of sensitive and rational animal, I could not rank myself with a herd of common projectors. But this feeling, which supported me in the commencement of my career, now serves only to plunge me lower in dust. All my speculations and hope are as nothing, and, like the archangel, who aspired to omnipotence, I am chained in eternal hell. My imagination was vivid, yet my power of analysis and application were intense. By the union of these qualities I conceived an idea, the execution of the creation of man. Even now I cannot recollect, without passion, my reveries while the work was incomplete. I trod heaven in my thoughts, now exulting in my power, now burning with the idea of their effects. From my infancy I was imbued with high hopes and a lofty ambition. But how am I sunk? Oh, my friend, if you had known me as I once was, you would not recognize me in this state of degradation. Despondency rarely visited my heart. A high destiny seemed to bear me on until I fell. Never to rise again.
Must I then lose this admirable being? I have longed for a friend. I have sought one who would sympathize with love for me. Behold, on the desert seas I have found such a one, but I fear I have only gained him to know of his value and lose him. I would reconcile him to life, but he repulses this idea. This is a long sentence. I'm gonna skip over the voice for this one. I thank you, Walton, he said, for your kind intentions towards me, so miserable a wretch. When you speak of new ties and fresh affections, think you that any can replace those who are gone? Can any man be to me as Clerval was, or any woman another Elizabeth? Even where these affections are not strongly moved by any superior excellence, the companions of our childhood always possess a certain power over our minds, which hardly any later friend can obtain. They know our infantine dispositions, which, however they may be afterward modified, are never eradicated, and they can judge of our actions
with more certain conclusions as to the integrity of our motives. A sister or brother can never, unless indeed such symptoms have been shown early, suspect the other of fraud or false dealings, when another friend, however strongly he may be attached, may, in spite of himself, be invaded with suspicion. But I enjoyed friends, dear not only through habit and association, but from their own merits, and wherever I am, the soothing voice of my Elizabeth and the conversation of Clerval will ever be whispered in my ear. They are dead, but one feeling in such a solitude can persuade me to persevere in life. If I were engaged in any high undertaking or design, fraught with extensive utility to my fellow creatures, then I could live to fulfill it. But such is not my destiny. I must pursue and destroy the being for whom I gave existence. Then my lot on earth will be fulfilled, and I may die. That was the end of the first letter. September 2nd. My beloved sister, I write to you encompassed by peril, and ignorant whether I am ever doomed to see again dear England and the dear friends that inhabit it. I am surrounded by mountains of ice, which admit to no escape, and threaten every moment to crush my vessel. The brave fellows, whom I have persuaded to be my companions, look towards me for aid, but I have none to bestow. There is something terribly appalling in our situation, yet my courage and hopes do not desert me. We may survive, and if we do not, I will repeat the lessons of my Seneca and die with a good heart. Yet what, Margaret, will be the state of your mind? You will not hear of my destruction, and you will anxiously await for my return. Years will pass, and you will have visitings of despair, and yet be tortured by hope. Oh, my beloved sister, the sickening failings of your heartfelt exceptions are, in prospect, more terrible to me than my own death. But you have a husband and lovely children. You may be happy. Heaven bless you, and make you so. My unfortunate guest regards me with the tenderest compassion. He endeavors to fill me with hope, and talks as if life were a possession which he valued. He reminds me how often the same accidents have happened to other navigators who have attempted this sea, and, in spite of myself, he fills me with cheerful auguries. Even the sailors feel the power of his eloquence. When he speaks, they no longer despair. He rouses their energy, and while they hear his voice, they believe these vast mountains of ice are molehills, which will vanish before the resolutions of man. These feelings are transitionary. Each day expectation delayed fills them with fear, and I almost dread a mutiny caused by this despair. September 5th. A scene has just passed in such uncommon interest that although it is highly possible that these papers may never reach you, I cannot forbear recording it. We are still surrounded by the mountains of ice, still in imminent danger of being crushed by their conflict. The cold is excessive, and many of the unfortunate comrades have already found a grave amidst a scene of desolation. Frankenstein has daily declined in health. A feverish fire still glimmers in his eyes, but he is exhausted, and when suddenly roused to any exertion, he speedily sinks again into apparent lifelessness. I mentioned in my last letter the fears I had entertained of a mutiny. This morning, as I sat watching the wan countenance of my friend, his eyes half closed, his limbs hanging listlessly, I was roused by half a dozen sailors who desired admission into the cabin. They entered, and their leader addressed me. He told me that he and his companions had been chosen by the other sailors to come in, deputation me, to make a demand which, in justice, I could not refuse. We were immured in ice and should probably never escape, but they feared that if, as was possible, the ice should dissipate and free passage be opened, I should be rash enough to continue my voyage and lead them into fresh dangers, after they might happily have surmounted this. They desired, therefore, that I should engage in a solemn promise that if the vessel should be freed, I would instantly direct my course southward. The speech troubled me. I had not despaired, nor had I yet conceived of the idea of returning, if set free. Yet could I, in injustice or even impossibility, refuse this demand? I hesitated before I answered, when Frankenstein, who had at first been silent, and indeed appeared hardly to have force enough to attend, now roused himself. His eyes sparkled, and his cheeks flushed with momentary vigor. Turning towards the men, he said,
"What do you mean? What do you demand of your captain? Are you then so easily turned from your design? Did you not call this glorious expedition? And wherefore was it glorious? Not because the way it was smooth and placid as southern sea, but because it was full of dangers and terror, because at every new incident your fortitude was to be called forth and your courage exhibited, because danger and death surrounded, and these dangers you were brave to overcome. For this it was glorious, for it was an honorable undertaking. You were hereafter to be hailed as the benefactors of your speech."
He goes on for a bit longer. I'm dropping the voice. "Name adored, to be as belonging to brave men who encountered death for honor and the benefit of mankind. And now, behold, with first imagination of danger, or if you will, the mighty and terrific trial of your courage, you shrink away, and are content to be handed down as men who had not strength enough to endure the cold and peril. And so, poor souls, they were chilly, and returned to their warm firesides. Why, that requires not this preparation. Ye need not have come this far, and dragged your captain to the shame of a defeat, merely to prove yourselves cowards. Oh, be men, or be more than men. Be steady to your purposes, and be firm as rock. This ice is not made of such stuff as your hearts might be. It is mutable, cannot withstand you, and if you say that it shall not, do not return to your families with the stigma of disgrace marked on your brows. Return as heroes who have fought and conquered, who know not what it is to turn their back on foe." He spoke this with such a voice, so modulated to the differently feelings expressed in his speech, with an eye so full of lofty design and heroism, that you can wonder that these men were moved. They looked at one another, and was unable to reply. I spoke. I told them to retire, and to consider what had been said, that I would not lead them further north if they strenuously desired the contrary, but I hoped that, with reflection, their courage would return. They retired, and I turned towards my friend. He was sunk in languor, and almost deprived of life. How all this will terminate, I do not know. But I had rather die than return shamefully, my purpose unfulfilled. Yet I fear such will be my fate. The men, unsupported by the ideas of glory and honourship, can never willingly continue to endure their present hardships. September 7th. The die is cast. I consented to return, if we are not destroyed. Thus, my hopes blasted by cowardice and indecision, I come back ignorant and disappointed. It requires more philosophy than I possess to bear this injustice with patience. September 12th. It is past. I am returning to England. I have lost my hopes of utility and glory, and have lost my friend. But I will endeavour to detail these bitter circumstances to you, dear sister, and while I am wafted towards England, towards you, I will not despond. September 19th, ice began to move. Oh, this must be written after. The way this is put out, I thought this was currently September 12th. The last message was September 12th. September 19th, the ice began to move, and roarings like thunder were heard at a distance, as the islands split and cracked in every direction. We were in most imminent peril, but as we could only remain passive, my chief attention was occupied by my unfortunate guest, whose illness increased in such a degree that he was entirely confined to his bed. The ice cracked beneath us, and was driven with force towards the north. A breeze sprung from the west, and on the 11th the passage towards the south became perfectly free. When the sailors saw this, and and that their return to their native country was apparently assured. A shout of tumultuous joy broke from them, loud and long continued. Frankenstein, who was dozing, awoke and asked the cause of my tumult. "They shout," I said, "because they will soon return to England."
Do they really return?
Alas, yes. I cannot withstand their demands. I cannot lead them unwillingly to danger, and must return.
And do so if you will, but I will not. You may give up your purpose, but mine is assigned to me by heaven, and I dare not. I am weak, but surely the spirits who assist my vengeance will endow me with sufficient strength.
Saying this, he endeavored to spring from bed, but the exertion was too great for him. He fell back and fainted. It was long before he was restored, and I often thought that life was entirely extinct. At length he opened his eyes, but he breathed with difficulty and was unable to speak. The surgeon gave him a composing draught and ordered us to leave him undisturbed. In the meantime, he told me that my friend had certainly not many hours to live. His sentence was pronounced, and I could only grieve and be patient. I sat by his bed watching him. His eyes were closed, and I thought he slept. But presently he called me in a feeble voice, and bidding me to come near, said, "Alas, the strength I relied on is gone, and I feel that I shall soon die. And he, my enemy and persecutor, may still be in being. Think not, Walton. In the last moments of my existence, I feel burning hatred and ardent desire of revenge. I once expressed, but I feel myself justified in desiring the death of my adversary. During these last days, I have been occupied in examining my past conduct, nor do I find it blamable. In a fit of enthusiastic madness, I created a rational creature, and was bound towards him to assure, as far as was in my power, his happiness and well-being. This was my duty, but there was another still paramount to that. My duties towards my fellow creatures had greater claims to my attention, because they included a greater proportion of happiness or misery. Urged by this view, I refused, and I did right in refusing. To create a companion for the first creature, he showed unparalleled malignity and selfishness and evil. He destroyed my friends. He devoted to destruction beings who possess exquisite sensations, happiness, and wisdom. Nor do I know where his first vengeance may end. Miserable himself, that he may render no other wretched, he ought to die. The task of his destruction was mine, but I have failed. When actuated by selfish and vicious motives, I ask you to undertake my unfinished work, and renew this request now. I am only induced by reason and virtue. Yet I cannot ask you to renounce your country and friends to fulfill this task. And now that you are returning to England, you will have little chance of meeting him. But in consideration of these points, and the well-balancing of what you may esteem your duties, I leave to you my judgment and ideas are already disturbed by the near approach of death. I dare not ask you to do what I think right, for I may still be misled by passion. That he should live to be an instrument of mischief disturbs me. In other respects of the hour, when I momentarily expect my release, is only a happy one, which I have enjoyed for several years. The forms of the beloved dead flit before me, and I hasten to their arms. Farewell, Walton. Seek happiness and tranquility, and avoid ambition, even if it only the apparently innocent one of distinguishing yourself in sciences and discoveries. Yet why do I say this? I have myself been blessed in these hopes, yet another may succeed. I shouldn't be laughing, I shouldn't be laughing.
His voice became fainter as he spoke, and at length, exhausted by his efforts, he sunk into silence. About half an hour afterwards, he attempted again to speak, but was unable. He pressed my hand feebly and closed his eyes forever, while the irritation of a gentle smile passed away from his lips. Margaret, what comment can I make on the untimely extinction of this glorious spirit? What can I say that will enable you to understand the depths of my sorrow? All that I should express would be inadequate and feeble. My tears flow, my mind is overshadowed by a cloud of disappointment. But I journey towards England, and I may there find consolation. I am interrupted. What do these sounds portend? It is midnight, the breeze blows fairly, and the watch on deck scarcely stir. Again, there is a sound of a human voice, but hoarser, and it comes from the cabin where the remains of Frankenstein still lie. I must arise and examine. Good night, my sister. Great God! What a scene has just taken place! I am yet dizzy with remembrance of it. I hardly know whether I shall have the power to detail it, yet the tale which I have recorded would be incomplete without the final and wonderful catastrophe. I entered the cabin, where lay the remains of my ill-fated and admirable friend. Over him hung a form which I cannot find words to describe, gigantic in stature, yet uncouth and distorted in proportions. As he hung over the coffin, his face was concealed by long locks of ragged hair, but one vast hand was extended, in colour and apparent texture like that of a mummy. When he heard the sound of my approach, he ceased to utter exclamations of grief and horror, and sprung towards the window. Never did I behold a vision so horrible as his face, of such loathsome yet appalling hideousness. I shut my eyes involuntarily, and endeavoured to recollect what were my duties with regard to this destroyer. I called on him to stay. He paused, looking on me with wonder, and again turning towards the lifeless form of his creator. He seemed to forget my presence, and every feature and gesture seemed instigated by the wildest rage of some uncontrollable passion. "That is also my victim," he exclaimed. "In his murder my crimes are consummated, and a miserable series of my being wound to its close. Oh, Frankenstein, generous and self-devoted being, what does it avail that I now ask thee to pardon me? I will irrevocably destroy thee by destroying all thou lovest. Alas, he is cold, he may not answer me." His voice seemed suffocated, and my first impulses, which had suggested to me a duty of obeying the dying request of my friend and destroying the enemy, were now suspended by a mixture of curiosity and compassion. I approached this tremendous being. I dare not again raise my looks upon his face. There was something so scarring and unearthly in his ugliness. I attempted to speak, but the words died on my lips. The monster continued to utter wild and incoherent self-reproaches. At length I gathered the resolution to address him, in a pause of the tempest of his passion. "Your repentance," I said, "is now superfluous. If you had listened to the voice of conscience and heed the strings of remorse, before you had urged your diabolical revenge to this extremity, Frankenstein would have lived." "And do you dream?" said the daemon. "Do you think that I was then dead to agony and remorse? He continued, pointing to the corpse. "He suffered not more in the consummation of the deed. Oh, not the 10,000th portion of the anguish that was mine during the lingering detail of his execution. A frightful selfishness hurried me on, while my heart was poisoned with remorse. Think ye that groans of Clerval were music to my ears? My heart was fashioned to be susceptible of love and sympathy. When wretched by misery and to vice and hatred, it did not endure the violence of change without torture, such as you cannot even imagine. After the murder of Clerval, I returned to Switzerland, heartbroken and overcome. I pitied Frankenstein. My pity amounted to horror. I abhorred myself. But when I discovered that he, the author at once of my existence and of its unspeakable torments,
dared to hope for happiness, that while he accumulated wretchedness and despair upon me, he sought his own enjoyment in feelings and passions, from the indulgence of which I was forever barred. The impotent envy and bitter indignation filled me with an insatiable thirst for vengeance. I recollected my threat and resolved that it should be accomplished. I knew that I was preparing myself for a deadly torture, but I was the slave, not the master of an impulse which I detested, yet could not disobey. Yet when she died, nay, then I was not miserable. I cast off all feeling, subdued all anguish to riot in the excess of my despair. Evil thenceforth became my good. Urged thus far, I had no choice but to adapt my nature to an element which I had willingly chosen. The completion of my demoniacal design became an insatiable passion, and now it is ended. There is my last victim. I was first touched by the... quickly. I was first touched by the expressions of his misery, yet when I called to mind what Frankenstein had said on his powers of eloquence and persuasion, and when I again cast my eyes to the lifeless form of my friend, indignation was rekindled within me. "Wretch," I said, "it is well that you come here to whine over the dissolution that you have made. You throw a torch into the pile of buildings, and when they are consumed, you sit among the ruins and lament the fall. Hypocritical fiend! If he whom you mourn still lived, still would he be the object again? Would he become the prey of your accursed vengeance? It is not pity that you feel. You lament only because the victim of your malignity is withdrawn from your power." "Oh, it is not thus. Not thus," interrupted the being. "Yet such must be the impression conveyed to you by what appears to be the purport of my actions. Yet I seek not a fellow feeling in my misery. No sympathy may I ever find. When I first sought it, it was the love of virtue, the feelings of happiness and affection, with which my whole being overflowed, that I wished to be participated. But now the virtue has become to me a shadow, and the happiness and affection are turned into bitter and loathing despair. In what should I seek for sympathy? I am content to suffer alone, while my sufferings shall endure. When I die, I am well satisfied that abhorrence and opprobrium should load my memory. Once my fancy was soothed with dreams of virtue, of fame, and of enjoyment. Once I falsely hoped to meet with beings who, pardoning my outward form, would love me for the excellent qualities which I was capable of bringing forth. I was nourished with high thoughts of honor and devotion, but now vice degraded me beneath the meanest animal. No crime, no mischief, no malignity, no misery can be found comparable to mine. When I call over the frightful catalogue of my deeds, I cannot believe that I am he whose thoughts were once filled with sublime and transcendent visions of the beauty and majesty of goodness. But it is even so. The fallen angel becomes the malignant devil, yet even that enemy of God and man had friends and associates in his desolation. I am quite alone. You who calls Frankenstein your friend seem to have knowledge of my crimes and his misfortunes, but in the detail which he gave you of them, he could not sum up the hours and months of misery which I endured, wasting in impotent passions. For while I destroyed his hopes, I did not satisfy my own desires. They were forever ardent and craving. Still, I desired love and friendship, and I was still spurned. Was there no injustice in this? Am I to be thought the only criminal when humankind has sinned against me? Why do you not hate Felix, who drove his friend from his door with contumely? Why do you not execrate the rustic who sought to destroy the savior of his child? Nay, these are virtuous, immaculate beings. I, the miserable and abandoned, and an aberration to be spurned at and kicked and trampled on. Even now my blood boils at the recollection of his injustice. But it is true that I am a wretch. I have murdered the lovely and the helpless. I have strangled the most innocent as they slept, and grasped to death his throat, who can never injure me or any other living things. I have devoted my crater, and selected a specimen of all that is worthy of love and admiration among men of misery. I have pursued him even to that irredeemable ruin. There he lies, white and cold in death. You hate me, but your abhorrence cannot equal that which I regard myself. I look on these hands which executed the deed, and think on the heart in which the imagination of it was conceived, and long for the moment when they will meet my eyes, and it will haunt my thoughts no more. Fear not that I shall be the instrument of future mischief. My work is nearly complete. Neither yours nor any man's death is needed to consummate the series of my being, and accomplish that which must be done, but it requires my own. Do not think that I shall be slow to perform the sacrifice. I will quit your vessel on the ice raft which brought me hither, and shall seek the most northern extremity of the globe. I shall collect my funeral pile, and consummate to the ashes this miserable frame, that its remains may afford no light to any curious and unhallowed wretch who would create such another as I have been. I shall die. I shall no longer feel agonies which now consume me, or be the prey of feelings unsatisfied yet unquenched. He who is dead, who called me into being, and when I shall be no more, the very remembrance of us both will speedily vanish. I shall no longer see the sun, or the stars, or feel the winds play on my cheeks. Light, feeling, and sense will pass away, and in this condition I must find my happiness. Some years ago, when images of this world affords first opened upon me, when I felt the cheering warmth of summer, and heard the rustling of the leaves and chirping of the birds, these were all to me. I should have wept to die. Now it is my only consolation. Polluted by crimes and torn by bitter remorse, where else can I find rest but in death? Farewell, I leave you, and in you the last of humankind whose eyes will ever behold. Farewell, Frankenstein. If thou wert alive, and yet cherished a desire of revenge against me, it would be so better satiated in my life than in my destruction. But it was not so. Thou didst seek my extinction, and I might not cause greater wretchedness. And yet, in some mode unknown to me, thou had not ceased to think and feel. Thou desiredst not my life for my own misery. Blasted as thou were, my agony was still superior to thine, for the bitter sting of remorse may not cease to rankle your wounds until death shall ever close for them ever. But soon, he cried with sad and solemn enthusiasm, I shall die, and what I now feel will no longer be felt. Soon these burning miseries will be extinct. I shall ascend my funeral pile triumphantly and exult in agony of the torturing flames. The light of that conflagration will fade away, and my ashes will be swept into the sea by the winds. My spirit will sleep in peace. Or if it thinks, it will not surely think thus. Farewell! He sprung from the cabin window as he said this, upon the ice raft which lay close to the vessel. He was soon borne away by the waves, and lost in darkness and distance. The end. That was it. That was Frankenstein. How are we feeling? Anyone still here? How are we feeling? I didn't expect that ending. I didn't expect that. Man. You know what? I think we can go for a bit longer. I'm gonna quickly... I have to answer some messages. I swear, it's always a read. I don't think, like, my phone ever, like, pushes Discord notifications, except for on these reading streams, and then I have to, like, quickly open up Discord on my computer to get them to stop sending me notifications to my phone. It is amazing how much of it there is between the books and various movies. I am excited for for the newest movie that's coming out. I'm gonna disconnect Stream Avatar so I can close it real quick. I'm really excited for that because I'm hoping it'll be more woke accurate, but you never know. Okay, let me move my chats up to the top too. Okay. So game plan. I'm gonna quickly change the title. Solving little problems. I can spell solving correct. Okay. Let me quickly make a thumbnail. I'm just gonna use the absolute basic thumbnail I usually use. Okay, here we go. Oh, I should probably put myself in the other corner though, which means I'll need to use another different art. Thumbnails. Do I have a thumbnail that uses a different piece of art that I can steal off of? Of course I don't. Okay. Clip Studio Paint. Open up downloads. Okay, and then I'm gonna need to quickly answer a message. Buying concert tickets with people. So I need to quickly ask for e-transfer things. Because I don't trust myself buying tickets. I don't trust myself at all. I know who I am. I know I'm not good at at finding things. Okay. Sorry, I'm trying to find my art folder. I forgot where it was for a second. Art, and then I think I've got credit in another video, so I can just use this and then copy over the credit. Bloop. Put that there. Wait, move it a little bit over. I'm not making good thumbnails. I'm just making a thumbnail. Okay. Press OK. Export PNG. Just a problem, but it's spelled all weird. Okay. Don't save. Okay, gonna quickly end the YouTube stream. There'll be a new room up any minute now.